Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Tanner's Favorite Things. I'm Tanner Knight, and today we have a box. Let's go ahead and dig into this thing and see what we got. All right, got this thing open. Let's see, it's packaging peanuts. My least favorite type of packaging, but they tend to do the job okay. This thing looks like it maintained central location in the box. It's not overfilled with these packaging peanuts, but this is going to be a pain in the ass. All right, I've got a big ass case here, and it does in fact say Epiphone on here. And before we dig into this, let me just say this is my very first Epiphone guitar. I know it kind of sounds a little backwards. Usually people get into guitars and go to Epiphone first and then go up to the Gibsons, the Fenders, you name it. But I kind of came at guitar a little older, so I had a little more expendable income, so I went for the Gibsons first, and now I'm checking out my very first Epiphone. It's a big case, so let's see what's inside. We have a Firebird! And continuing with the firsts, this is my very first Firebird. So let me turn this thing around so I can see it. All right, an Epiphone Firebird. This is actually a Firebird V. Each different model of the Firebird gets its own Roman numeral. There's a Firebird 1, a Firebird 3, a Firebird 5, and also a Firebird 7. So those four models represent all the models of the Firebird. And there's also a Thunderbird bass. These are basses in the shape of a Firebird and with the scale and dimension of a bass. These are called Thunderbirds, and they have the designation 2 and 4, if you were wondering where those even numbers went. So that's all of the models of the Firebird, and to make things even more complicated, they called this initial design a reverse design because the lower bout is bigger than the upper bout, so people could associate that with the reverse body style. So when the popularity of these guitars didn't catch on, in the 70s, they made some that were called non-reverse, where the body is actually flipped in a more quote-unquote orientation, where the larger bout is on top. I personally find this to be less attractive than the Firebird reverse design, so make your own decisions on what you prefer, but those are all of the models of the Firebird that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's probably some more alternate ones like the Firebird X, which we won't talk about here, but those are the core Firebird models from Gibson and now, of course, Epiphone. But this is a model that I don't have too much familiarity with, I'll be honest. Never owned one. I've had very few opportunities to play one, and just holding this, it's actually really, really nice feeling. It's way out of tune, so we'll worry about that in a second. But I'll be honest, Robert Baker, you got me on this one. He just recently released a video about this exact guitar, the Epiphone Firebird V in whatever the vintage color is, vintage. So this is that. It's a neck through guitar. You can see that this piece of wood is one piece with these two glued on as the wings. So the neck is one continuous piece, has a big old headstock, even bigger than the Explorer or Flying V headstock. And overall, it's a nice feeling guitar. This is way nicer feeling than I expected. Let's take a look at this grain here. Not too exciting from a wood grain standpoint, but you do see that we have some walnut stripes in the middle of this neck through design. That's very characteristic of the Firebird design, and you can see it even better on the back here. Those walnut strips go the entire length of the body and the neck, all the way up through past the headstock, and that's one of those very characteristic design appointments of the Gibson Firebird. But in 1958, Gibson came out with the Explorer, the Flying V, the Moderne. So these guitars, think of as the Futura collection. I think that was the name that they threw around with the Gibsons in 1958. They were very forward-thinking guitars, and they kind of failed. So they didn't really sell hardly any guitars from that line in the 50s. So 1960s come around and they want to have a new model here to compete with the Strat and the Telecaster of Fender. So they come out with this Firebird model in 1963. So that's 5 years after the Explorer, after the V, after the 335, that historic batch of guitars. And it doesn't really make a splash either. The 4 Firebird is kind of forgotten in the 60s, and by 1965 Gibson is sold to Norland Company, and so that whole thing gets changed and the direction is changed, and you don't really see the Firebird again until 1972. And of course, as you might have expected, they were underappreciated in their time, and it took a good 20, 30 years for the Explorer, the V, the Firebird to find footing amongst modern guitar players, and people found that they're actually pretty awesome guitars. So Gibson has reissued all of these guitars throughout the years, starting in kind of like the early 70s or late 60s, that Norland era when Norland, the big corporation that owned Gibson, was in charge. So this is obviously not a Gibson, this is an Epiphone. It says so right there. And what does that mean? Well, if you're not familiar with the Epiphone brand, most people are just because they are pretty ubiquitous, but the Epiphone brand is Gibson's budget line of guitars. And a quick history, back in the early days of electric guitar building, even pre-Les Paul in the 40s and 50s, Epiphone was a very, very respected USA maker of guitars, and they originated in New York City or Queens, somewhere in the New York metro area, and they were really a standard for the jazz cats of the day. Any electric jazz box that you would see on the major stages, chances are they were either an Epiphone, maybe a Gibson, maybe a Gretsch, or a D'Angelico, one of those kind of jazz associated guitars. But Epiphone was very, very highly respected and a competitor of Gibson that was almost considered in the same tier, if not in the same exact tier of quality of build. So the Epiphones and the Gibsons went head to head for a couple decades, but Gibson decided, you know what, let's not have any more of this competition. Let me just buy this brand. And they kind of, they didn't morph it overnight into a budget brand, but Epiphone has since been repurposed as Gibson's budget brand, and these guitars are all made overseas, either in Korea, Indonesia, China. Some of the early or 80s ones, I believe, are made in Japan, and those are kind of sought after. Japan luthiers tend to have a higher standard of artistry in the 80s, and that shines through on those guitars. But this is I don't know where this was probably made in China. I think their factory nowadays is in China. This is a 2021 guitar. So a 2-year-old guitar, or one and a half year old guitar. I can't find a serial number on here to say exactly. I think they put it in the neck pocket or something, but let's take a closer look at this guitar. Now, what you might expect on a Firebird are these Firebird humbuckers. These are specific to this guitar, and you may just say, oh, they're mini humbuckers. And they do look very similar to mini humbuckers, but they're very unique to this guitar. This is the style of pickup that comes in the Firebird. You can order a Firebird pickup in different models. They will do that if you pay them enough money, but typically this is the only model where you'll find these pickups. And they are humbucking pickups, so there you go. I don't know why they opted to have this kind of like a specialist guitar, but otherwise we have metric tailpiece and bridge here. I don't know if they're Tone Pros or not, but probably not. They usually have their own brand of hardware, and I don't know. I can't say whether it's good or bad. This is my very first experience with it, but it looks okay. No problems there. The fretboard is Indian Laurel. It looks very rosewood in construction, but it's actually Indian Laurel, which I believe is actually a family of rosewood. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think laurel and rosewood are somewhat related, so obviously the wood is going to look a little bit similar if that's the case. Otherwise, we have a bound fretboard with trapezoid acrylic inlays. These are not mother of pearl. Obviously on an Epiphone you will only find plastics. So plastic there, but they look cool. They actually have a lot of figuring for acrylic. It's not just like a flat plastic like a pickguard or something. dances and moves with the light. So that's kind of nice. We have, I don't know what kind of nut this is, but I assume some sort of synthetic nut. It's not poking out as badly as I had expected. On a lot of these, the nut is a bit proud on both sides or one side, and that's actually pretty flush, and you can't really feel any differentiation between the binding and the actual neck. So really good craftsmanship on this import guitar. What I've been noticing while I've been talking is this little patch right here that dances. It's got really nice figuring just on that one portion of the neck right here. And it's right in your line of sight, so it's very pleasant to see. Hopefully it's not too distracting because it's the only portion of this neck that has any significant flame or, I don't know, beauty at all. The rest of the pieces of wood here, mahogany, are pretty normal looking, I would say. But overall, mahogany neck with the the walnut skunk stripes. They're not skunk stripes, they're just kind of strips in there, but we'll call them that for lack of a better term. We have the bonnet style of knobs, gold knobs, and these pots. They feel pretty good. They're nice and tight, and they have a good resistance without being too gritty. They're smooth. So there you go. I'll turn these all the way down. Our switch tip made it okay. Sometimes these can break in shipping, so it's always recommended to just take these off and put them in a little plastic bag for shipping. But we lucked out on this one, so that's good news. Otherwise, no dings or cracks or anything to report. It made it okay. We've got Grover, mini Grovers, 18-to-1 tuners. Those are a nice addition, not something you always find on a budget guitar. And other than that, our strap locks look pretty standard. They're just the big old conical style, not locked. We have our input jack right here on the front, and this thing is ready to rock. So that's what we have, an Epiphone Firebird V or Firebird 5, as is the case, the neck through construction version. And just holding it, it makes me want to play it. I've been itching to get my hands on one of these for a while, and now I can actually plug it in and see what she sounds like. So let's go ahead and do that right now. All right, I've just played this thing for a little bit to get acquainted with it, and I really, really like this guitar. I am blown away by a $600+ guitar. We're talking $600, $650 you can generally pick these up for. And this thing is virtually indistinguishable from one of my Gibsons or several of my Gibsons. I don't know, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far, but let's go ahead and hear what this thing sounds like. So before we play any tones here, let's talk about the layout. We have volume, volume, tone, tone. Pretty straightforward for Gibson. We have a neck volume, which is here, and a bridge volume here, neck, tone, bridge, tone. So currently we are in the bridge, and that sounds like this. Really sweet sounding bridge. It's not too in your face. It's just really nice. So nice cleans in the bridge, very vintage sounding, I would say. These pickups are called the FB720 pickups. They are made by Epiphone, but they're made in the USA. I'm not entirely sure if they're made in the same factory as the Gibson pickups, but they are USA wound pickups in this international style Firebird guitar. So a really nice professional feeling guitar. Great pickups, great tuners. The nut, no problem so far. Tuning has been nice and stable, and it just rocks. So we haven't gotten it in the dirty channel yet, but I assume it will sound great. Before we do, let's go ahead and hear that neck pickup in the cleans. A little sweeter sounding than the bridge, and that's about what you would expect, so no surprises. So nice bridge and neck tones, very usable. And just for fun, I did like the middle position quite a bit, so let's hear that. Here's the middle. I think this is probably where I'll stick most of the time with this guitar in the cleans, just because it really bridges the both of those together very nicely. Nice. So I'm not terribly surprised that these USA pickups would sound great in the clean, but let's go ahead and kick on the tube screamer, add a little dirt to the signal, and see how this guitar handles it. Nice, great. Let's hear the neck with the tube screamer. I don't usually go into the neck pickup with this pedal, but just for kicks, here we go. Definitely more my style in the bridge, but if you do want that rounder sound with a little bit of dirt, we can do it. Okay, let's go into the Super Overdrive SD1. This is a bit more gain, not quite heavy metal territory, but if you did want to lay down some crunchy rhythm, then this would be my choice, and some kind of sweeter leads. This one has what you need. So we're still in our bridge, Super Overdrive SD1 by Boss. Nice sounds. I think that's a really respectable rhythm crunch sound, erring on the side of lead. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and play up a little higher on the neck. Nice. What I love about this guitar is it's also a very quiet guitar. Yeah, there's a little bit of noise. And it does feedback if you don't, tend the dials, but if you just keep your hand on it, it stays relatively quiet, respectably so. Speaking of quiet, let's disturb the quiet and go to the metal zone. So the metal zone, a little noisier, but that's because we got some serious gain on tap. Here we go, metal zone in the bridge. Yeah, you can really wang on these things and they just want to play loud. This is a great metal guitar. In fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and drop that D. This is a great doom metal guitar. And although I don't play much of that, I can't profess to being a doom metal aficionado. I do like the sound, and this thing sounds really good with it. We are playing through the Marshall Plexi 1987X 50-watt head directly above my left ear here, and that's what you're hearing into the channel number 2, going into my pedal board, into this guitar, kind of reverse. Guitar, pedal board, into the front of the amp. And our cabinet is our Marshall 4x12. This is our MF280 cab. This is a 4x12 with 4 Marshall branded Celestion V30s, and they have 70 watts a piece opposed to 60 watts, so hence the 280 moniker. All of the sound is being captured by one microphone today, at least the guitar. I do have my Sennheiser AVX wireless lapel mic capturing my voice here, but we do have one Sennheiser E906 on the upper right-hand speaker in the cabinet. So that's what you're hearing. It's a really down and dirty sound with this Explorer at a very low-cost price. So is $700 cheap? I'm not going to go ahead and say that. That's still a fair amount of money to invest in an instrument. And I think that if you can find one at that price point that plays like a $1,000 instrument or a $2,000 instrument, then why the hell wouldn't you play that instrument? I'm not necessarily a music snob when it comes to instruments. I think every single instrument has its place and can be played appropriately and you know, make great music. This thing, however, checks a lot of those boxes, being relatively inexpensive and punching way above its weight with its playability, its feel, its sound. Everything about this guitar feels high-end and looks high-end for that matter. So I'm not going to go ahead and say that I would swap this truss rod cover out for one that says Gibson and try to pass it off as such, because obviously it's not, and I don't believe in that kind of, you know, fallacy. But I think if you did that, just hypothetically, and handed this to a person and said, what do you think of this Gibson Explorer? They'd be like, damn, that's a sweet Gibson. Which, you know, that's a pretty high compliment for a guitar that is basically a 1/6 or the 7th of the cost of a Gibson. And I actually did just find the serial number. It's imprinted on here, and it does say 210315344490. So this is a 21 guitar, 2021. So I don't know exactly how to discern the batch and what day it was built on this serial number like you can on a Gibson. It might not even have that type of codification, but either way, this is a 2021 guitar, and yeah, let's hear some more tones. So this thing is a metal machine, and I don't know if the Firebird itself is known as a metal guitar, but this one specifically with this bridge humbucker pickup sounds friggin' awesome with the metal zone. It is bouncy, it's punchy, it's got plenty of chug, and of course the Marshall amp never disappoints no matter what guitar you got plugged in, so an embarrassment of riches, I guess. What can I say? But this is an Epiphone Firebird, an Epiphone, and it feels like a frickin' Gibson. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised because they've been at it for a while. They've been building guitars for 30 plus years now in these factories, and they've got their process pretty well dialed. This is testament to that workmanship, and it's a great, great guitar. Robert Baker, I don't know whether to thank you or to curse you for exposing me to this guitar, but it really does punch above its weight based on the, I don't know, 30 minutes I've played it so far today. I'm gonna go ahead and jam with it tonight in the context of a group and see how she does, but just know that this is a really friggin' nice guitar. If the Les Pauls, the Explorers, the ES35s, all the other Gibson style of instruments are of this quality coming out of this Epiphone factory, there is zero reason why you should not check them out. And that's as simple as that. I know Gibson doesn't want to hear that because this same guitar in a US spec would cost you probably $4,000, and that's probably on the low end. So here we are, $650, $700 versus $4,000 to $5,000. You make the call. Obviously, value is in the eye of the beholder, and I'm not going to make that call for you. For me, a person who typically gravitates towards US, sometimes Japanese-made guitars, the idea of owning a Chinese-made Epiphone is, I don't know, it seems a little sacrilegious, but I'm not going to say that because this is a freaking awesome guitar. It does not need to come to this for you to realize how good these guitars are. So go ahead and pick yourself up one. I think the worst case scenario is if you get this guitar and you get a dud or you just don't like it for whatever reason, it's still going to hold its value. It's still going to be worth at least what you paid for it until the market drops out, which it doesn't seem like it's happening anytime soon. So I'd say pick one up, take a shot. This one feels like it's one of the better ones that came out of the factory. I obviously don't have a whole host of them to compare it against, but it just looks great, it feels great, and most importantly, it sounds great. So the Epiphone Firebird with the FB720 US made Epiphone pickups in here, just a rock solid value. This particular one came with this hard case. That was why I bought this specific one over a few others that were available at the time. You can probably find 6 or 7 of these for sale at any given point, brand new even, from local vendors or reverb vendors. But this one was a 2021, had a hard case, and that provided a little extra value for me, and I still got it for that $650 price point. So all in all, I'm really happy with this purchase, and I'm glad that I finally added the Firebird to my collection. I'm not upset that it's not a Gibson. I'm not upset one bit. In fact, I think it makes me think a little bit twice about all the other Gibsons that I paid for in the past, but we're not going to think about that too much because I love those guitars, and I always will love those guitars. But this one, a really great value. I can't tell you enough. Think about what we have here. A set neck guitar with a tilt back angled headstock, which I don't know, it looks probably like an 11 degree if I had to guess. But there's no scarf joint. This is an actual one piece of wood that they crafted this neck out of with the tilt back headstock. And well, I said one piece. It's one with pieces of mahogany and the walnut striped together. But once you have it all together, think of it as one piece, because that's what it is. But either way, it's not a scarf joint where they cut it off here and flip it around. It's not some weird glue-on deal. This is a honest-to-God neck-through guitar with a really nice burst. I didn't even mention the paint job on it. Look at this burst. It's very uniform. It shows us the wood, and it shows us what we want to see on this Firebird. Just very classic, very vintage looking. I have no complaints about the paint job. I do believe it is a poly finish. I can't imagine that the Epiphone factory is using nitrocellulose. That seems just a bit too expensive for a guitar at this price point. So some sort of plastic poly finish, but it feels really good. It is pretty glossy, so I'll bet this will feel better after playing it. Until then, We've just got to deal with the gloss. Still feels very nice, doesn't feel sticky at all like my Gibson SG. It's very nice, very good feeling quality product. So Epiphone Firebird V. I'm digging it. I hope you guys like this video. If you have any questions about this particular guitar, or if you'd like to see it in any other scenario, let me know. I do have the 5150, this orange amp, a PV Encore over there, so obviously those different amps will sound different with this guitar, so if you have any specific requests, let me know and I'll put together a short video for you. In the meantime, let me know if you have any experience with this specific guitar. Of course, always like and subscribe if you do like this content. That helps me determine what to bring you in the future. But until then, hopefully we will see you on the next one. Thank you once again for watching.